Hello, my name is Oliver Bates. I'm here to speak to you about common concerns over genetically modified organisms, or GMOs for short. Before we can begin speaking on this topic, however, we have to acknowledge the unfortunately large number of Americans who suffer from scientific illiteracy. These are people who cannot or choose to not understand how the scientific method works. Because they do not understand how data works, they are easily swayed by pseudoscience and emotional pleas when they're presented as fact. The anti-GMO movement is built entirely on the shoulders of ignorance about genetics, agriculture, and the methodologies we use to ascertain facts from data. The fuel for this movement is based on good intentions, the desire to eat healthy, safe foods. We don't want to feed our families dangerous foods. We don't want to risk their lives. So we're driven to argue in favor of things we perceive to be safer. We speak out against things we feel are dangerous. We do this because we care about our fellow man. Unfortunately, we're dead wrong, and nearly all of us don't know what we're talking about. First, there is no such thing as the non-genetically modified agricultural product that human beings eat on this planet. Simply put, GMOs don't exist. Every agricultural product, every food grown out of the ground has had its genetics modified by human cultivation. Cultivation is the process of growing a generation of a plant and then harnessing the samples with the desirable traits you want. Through history, human beings discovered methods of splicing the genetic material of one plant and placing it inside another plant. The equipment used? A knife and rope. Seriously, that's the GMO laboratory of human history, people. Human beings have cultivated every agricultural product on Earth. There is no largely produced and consumed food on this planet that exists in its natural state. Simply look at any artistic rendition of a watermelon from the medieval era, and you'll see a plant that's vastly different than what we eat now. The apple didn't even exist. The potato, it started off small and purple and wasn't even eaten by anyone but a small number of Peruvians and Bolivians until about the 16th century. The banana, an inedible seed pod before humans made it into what we eat now. Corn, it looked like a weed until humanity changed it. Carrots, they looked like the roots of a flower before us. The tomato, also from Bolivia. Also not eaten by human beings until the Renaissance. If I take a plant and I cut it with a knife in the right spot, and I cut another plant in the same way, and then tie them together, I have done exactly the same thing I would do in a laboratory, by splicing the genetic code of a plant and inserting it into another cell. With both methods, I have to grow the plant to a certain point so that I can harness the samples I want. When I use a knife and rope, it takes generations to cultivate changes. Years. With a lab, I remove all of the variables and free radicals from the equation, by using consistent, measurable, repeatable science. Farms are dirty. Farms are full of bacteria and other DNA. By eliminating the chance for contamination, I can grow my samples and cultivate them in a grow room with the same water, soil, and light, only in a much cleaner and much faster way. The scientific method is a body of techniques we use to investigate things, acquire new knowledge, or correct and update things we already knew. Science isn't different than cultivation, it is cultivation. There is no difference. But the fear that there's a difference is huge. People distrust corporations and drug makers and scientists in general. We suspect people of just trying to make a buck and not testing foods for safety. These fears are valid, but they're incorrectly directed to GMOs and scientists who are genetically modifying cultivars. What most people are actually afraid of are transgenic foods. Yes, transgenic. A transgenic plant is a plant that has had the genetic material of an organism that wasn't a plant inserted into it. For instance, bringing a pesticide resistance from an insect into a strain of apples, or putting the DNA of a fish into corn to make it produce more natural sugar. I can't tie a fish to a plant and make a hybrid fish plant. This seems unnatural, right? Yes, it does, and that's why you mistrust it. It doesn't feel natural to you. That's understandable. But let's take a moment to remember, transgenics aren't GMOs. The term GMO doesn't even describe a plant that exists. There's no such thing as a non-genetically modified food. We're afraid of transgenics, and we need to use the correct word when we discuss this because it matters. When a pharmaceutical company makes a new drug, they have to test it for years before humans can even try it. We trust this method because it makes things safe. We do not currently require this trial period for transgenic organisms. That's right. We don't make people who grow hybrid organisms with chimpanzee or fish DNA stop and test their products for long-term results. Everyone has every right to be upset about this and demand that we label transgenic foods. So why bother with saying transgenics if everyone says GMOs are what we're talking about? Because the organics industry wants you to think that their much more expensive and lower yield products are superior to traditional agriculture. And we're buying this marketing ploy to the tune of $40 billion a year. We buy organic foods because we think it's more pure and natural. Science strongly disagrees. When we label GMOs, we're associating regular agricultural products with transgenics. We're treating it like frankenfood when it's not. We have to be angry about the right thing. Farms in America are disappearing because we can't use science to make healthier and better foods. The organics industry charges more for their foods, and they use more water and more land to grow them than traditional agriculture. Why? Because modern plants have been engineered to have higher yields. This becomes a big problem when you realize that traditional agriculture costs less and makes less expensive food. Poor people cannot afford organic foods. It wastes too much. We have to have traditional, science-backed agriculture to feed our growing population that's already more than 7.3 billion people. Transgenics need to be tested. Traditional agriculture is science. Organics are unnecessary and wasteful. Don't label foods as GMOs. That doesn't exist, and it hurts farmers. Label transgenics and demand they be tested more. But don't take my word for it. Just ask the consensus of horticulturalists and food scientists the world over. Ask them why they all scratch their heads when they see us freaking out about GMOs. Thank you, and have a nice day.